All right, I'm recording now. Okay, so yeah, so the next one is a random color curve. So many of you hopefully know that if you right click on these colors up here, you actually get the color curve dialog. And the color curve dialog, much like the value curve, hence the name, lets you change the color over time, and also, as you'll see in a minute, space. So the concept is the color at the beginning of the effect will be the color here, and the color at the end of the effect will be the color here, and it can change. And the way you set it is you just come up here and you click where you want the color to change, and it inserts one of these bars. And if you double click on that bar, you can come in here and you can set the color. You can double click on an existing bar and you can change the color. You can move those colors around. And so forth. Now, by default, it's a gradient. You can also come in here and say it's actually just a hard transition, and so it's green here, and then it does a hard transition to magenta. But the other thing you can ask for is random, and what it will do is it will randomly choose a color between those two colors during this duration. And you can imagine if you chose orange and red. So if you made that one, sorry, if you made it yellow and orange, and you place that on something, you would think that you might get a flickering color that might look like a candle. Now, I was told it didn't actually look very much like a candle, but that was the theory of a random color curve. I'm not sure how useful it is, but it's there now, and once something's there, it's hard to remove it, just in case someone did find a use for it. So that's a random color curve. Shift double click highlights the corresponding form. Okay, so this is particularly useful when you're doing Papagayo, because it works the same on timing tracks. If I come up here, put a couple of timing marks in. So what you can do is you can come down here to effect, you hold down the shift key and you double click, and it will highlight that section of the waveform. Over here, it also tells you how long that selection is. So you could, anytime you want to select something, you can always see how much of the waveform that you've selected. But if this was a set of lyrics, I don't know, and you wanted to highlight that section so that you could then play that in a loop while you sort of do the alignment and all of that sort of stuff. It's a quick way to select exactly the precise area of the timing track. While I'm at it, one of the other things that was changed just before Christmas is when you place your mouse over the top of the effect, down the bottom of the screen there, it tells you precisely when an effect starts, when it ends, and works out the duration for you. And so that lets you come over here and say, I want that to be precisely 10 seconds. I can see that, well, it looks like 10 seconds, but it's not really. And a little bit of adjustment, I've got it right on the 10-second mark, which saves me having to zoom right in to get some pretty precise location. And I can also do a quick run up between two effects. Yeah, they both start on the 3-second mark and they are both 1 second long, so I know that these are exactly the same. Whereas normally you couldn't tell that unless you zoomed all the way in. So just some things to make your life a little bit easier. Okay, go past the bugs. Enhancements, add a free model description property. Okay, so this is over here on the layout tab. A lot of people maintain spreadsheets for their shows. They keep records of all sorts of things, much of which is actually in xLIghts. And therefore I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice to have a free format field that I could put in here, and you know, I could type whatever it is that I want to type, like, you know, this is the red tagged connector or something. And I can just put anything I want in here and record it against that particular model. And then when we come up to tools and we do the export models, and then we go over to Excel and we, oh, come on, let's CSV file. Why doesn't it just give me, why is it not giving me CSV files? There it is, text files, there it is. And so it will include that description field over here in the second column here. It'll include that description field. So the concept being is, in an ideal world, I would manage to not have to have a separate spreadsheet, and I would always know that everything in here was exactly the way it was set up in xLights. Some other enhancements that have been made in here, it gives you some summary data around, you know, how many models you actually have, what's the first used channel, what's the last used channel. It actually works out the actual number of used channels, so if you leave any gaps, it will subtract it down. And if you've set up the light count correctly on things, it'll also do its best at guessing how many actual bulbs that represent, rather than number of channels, which is obviously an inflated number when you run pixels. So yeah, something just to give you an idea of just how big your show is, and stops you faking it. There are some other things on here. Obviously, it's also showing me my controller details. It also gives me those calculated start and end channels, and we'll come back and we'll look at this controller connection stuff a little bit later when we talk about the FPP upload, which is how the Falcon controller knows how you've wired your models up. But this is a really useful thing to use. And in fact, when you do things like send us a debug report using package logs, we actually generate this thing so that we can look at it when we're debugging it. Add a star to the ripple effect and the VU meter. So the ripple effect, which is just here, and as usual, I will show it here. So it obviously defaults to a circle, but there is now a star option. And I think, yes, there's something here that lets you define the number of points, so you can create stars of a variety of points on the ripple. And the VU meter, which is not going to make a lot of sense without an audio file, has a similar feature. So we'll go and choose my annoying song, my favorite annoying song. Where's our matrix? There it is. And so if we go down to level shape, and then we can come down to the shape, and we can make that a star. And I think if we set that a little bit smaller, you can see that it's a 4-point star. And I think if you change it, no, yeah, that one here, as you change that parameter up, it changes the size of the star. And there's also a filled in star as well, which will fill it in with the colors that are chosen. And in this case, because we had that randomly color changing thing, as you can see, it's randomly color changing over the duration, and the size of this star happens to be proportional to what the song is at that point. And I won't subject you to the song at this point, maybe later. Okay. Enhancement, show waveforms, selected duration. So we've already seen that, where it shows you how long you've selected out of the waveform. Adding mouth image hints to the faces dialog. I don't know about you guys, but I had this all the time when I was doing the faces in here. In the faces dialog, I had to go and look at a cheat sheet to work out what shape the mouth should be for each of the phonemes here. Yet, obviously, it doesn't change. And so now there is a pictorial representation of the phonemes here, which hopefully will save you a bit of time and means that you don't have to keep a separate cheat sheet to work out what shape the mouth should be, which should make setting your faces up a lot quicker. I'm not reading chat, by the way, guys, so if there's something in chat that's urgent, someone needs to speak up. Single color string color in the sequence row heading. Okay, so let's add in a single color string. which will go down here and we'll make it string properties. We're going to make it a single color. Let's give it a color. I don't know, cyan. Okay, so there's our single color string. So then when we come over and we create a new sequence, because that's how I add it on, you can see here that it shows this square, which shows me the color of that single line. And that helps me when I'm sequencing, because I know that this model is a cyan bulb and it's only going to respond to cyan colors. And so when I'm sequencing, I drop the right color effects on it, or white, and I know what's going on. If you've got, you know, something like an RGB white tree with different colors and you want to know which string you're dropping it on, so you don't have to put the color strictly in the name anymore, it's going to give you that visual hint about what color the string responds to. E131 sync we've already spoken about. Value curves on the morph, fan, and shockwave effect. So this is, and I think when Gil first introduced this, he produced a video which showed a whole bunch of these things coming together. So as you can see here, he's gone and he's added a whole bunch of these value curves onto ramp up, down, sawtooth. Yeah. And so you can now get some rather interestingly different effects by using a value curve on some of the settings for the shockwave, the fan, and the morph effect. Some things that you otherwise would really struggle to do. I'm not going to go in each of them. They're all exactly as you would expect. They have the behavior that's consistent with whatever that particular parameter means. The X and Y ones can be really quite useful because effectively what that does is allows me to move it around. Did I not have it? Oh, there it is. And so now it's jumping backwards and forwards from left to right over the course of duration of the effect. So, like I say, some additional ways of looking at things. All right, bug, enhancement. Change the default model group back to minimal grid. I don't think I need to touch on that. Additive, subtractive, minimum and maximum blend modes. Okay, so hopefully you're all familiar with the blend modes. So when you have multiple layers here, and I don't know, let's throw a color wash on, and let's throw, I don't know, what the hell, let's add a fire effect on. All right, and so we can come up to the top effect here and we can put these blend modes on. Well, Dan's added these things like additive. And so what additive will do is it will take every single pixel and it will take the color of those pixels and add them together. And the net effect of that is obviously the red goes up by whatever the other red is, the green goes up by whatever the other green is, and the blue goes up by whatever the other blue channel is. And obviously, if they're all reasonably high, you end up in a situation where it goes white, and you see that happen as well. So that adds those colors together. Subtractive, of course, does exactly the reverse. And so you've got a tendency for things to trend towards black and trend towards the color that's otherwise not present. And so because these things are largely reds and greens or yellows, it subtracts out. And you get the colors that don't overlap. Maximum takes the maximum brightness of each color and merges it together. And the minimum, of course, takes the minimum color, which in the case of black is black. And so here you get the fire, it's subtracting the yellow out and things like that. So some different ways of blending things together to potentially create some different effects. As Clyde said a million times in his videos, the only way to really get to know these things is to play with them and see what they do. It's only when you get really familiar with it that you can start to reason out what's going to happen when you do some things. So that's an optimization. Another check, sequence check, effect descriptions. Okay, all right. I'm willing to bet no one will use this, but I'll show it to you. You can actually go in and create a description against an effect. All right. I don't know. What are we going to say? This is shockwave. So shockwave custom. I don't know. You can actually just put a description against it. That description will appear down here in the status bar at the bottom there. You'll see it says Shockwave Custom, and so you can put a description against it. To be honest, I created this because Matt Johnson needed it when he was doing his show. The other place where it will turn up is in Tools, Export Effects. File, open, effects. So you can see that the description turns up here. Exporting effects gives you, many of you may not have seen this, but exporting effects gives you a list of all your effects, when they start, how long they are, what element they're on, and so forth. It also tells you how many effects you've got. And then it does the interesting thing of summarizing your sequence. So it'll tell you how many color washes you have and the total amount of time that each of those effects have used. And if you've used things like video effects or picture effects, it'll also tell you over here, it'll tell you all the files you're using, and down here it will deduplicate that list and give you a summary list of all the files that your sequence references. Again, it's data, we have it. If you want to use it, we allow you to export it. It is after your data, after all your data. More model checks. More model checks. You can see we found new bugs, and therefore garland lights optional on the tree effect. So the tree effect, not a very commonly used effect, I'll admit. Looks better if your color is green. It kind of looks like a tree. The old one used to have these, I'm not sure if you can see them on the video, but there's these little lights that come out. They're like garlands, and they move backwards and forwards over the duration of the effect. I hate it, so I added the option to turn it off, and you get something that looks more like just a tree. That's that one. Multi-layer insertion. You've kind of already seen me do that. It used to be that if you wanted to add layers here, you had to add the layers one at a time. Now you can insert multiple layers below. And so if I want 13 layers, I can just quickly add 13 layers. If you're using presets and importing things, it helps you get them really quickly. And there is also then a delete multiple layers. Unfortunately, we don't let you just highlight the layers you wanted to delete. And so I can go in and say delete 5 layers, and it will get rid of 5 of those layers. It used to warn you if, it used to warn you and say, oh, are you sure you want to delete it? But now I check to see whether there are any effects there. If there's no effects there, it just deletes it immediately. If there were effects there, it would have given me a warning to tell me that I was going to delete some of my sequencing. Palette reversal and deletion, we've seen that. Links to common web resources. So you saw this briefly a few minutes ago. Up here, I provide links to the official xLights page, to the GitHub repository for the issue tracker. There's a link to the xlights.org download page. There's also a link to the new video site, where we're trying to gather together a lot of the xLight videos so that there's one single place that you can go to find those things. And also the Nutcracker forum also have links up here. So if you're not familiar with all of these particular locations, and I imagine most of you are, but you can go up there and quickly get to them. Make import and export of effects. Remember the last type. Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I don't do it very often, but every now and then I need to import the effects. And this drop down here always defaulted to Superstar. Now what it does is it remembers the last one that you used, because generally speaking, people only import one type 99% of the time. So if you're using other people's xLight sequences, you've probably got it set to XML. If you're coming over from LOR, you're probably importing your LOR a lot, and this now remembers what you last used. And the export, of course, is done by right-clicking on the model, and you can export the model. And again, up here, by default, it's the LOR clipboard format. But if I export it to a video file here, the next time I come in and do the export, we're going to assume that you want to export it to the same type. It just makes it a little bit easier to use. Bug enhancement. That's a minor thing. Add the -R command line switch to render and save. So, okay, so this is something that Dan introduced. It was Sean then posted a set of scripts onto the Facebook page, and basically what it lets you do is run xLights from the command line or from a batch file with the /R parameter and the name of a sequence XML file. And what xLights will do is it will fire up, it will load up that XML file, it will render it, and then it will save it. Save the FSCQ file. And the power of that is if you've gone and made a simple change in your layout, maybe you've added a dimming curve, or maybe you've just introduced something small or simple, and now you want to go back and make sure that all of your sequences are up to date. Well, previously what you had to do is you had to manually go in and open each one up, render all, or at least save with a renderer on save, and resave your files. And I don't know about you, but in those last few days before I'm getting my show up and running, I'm changing a few little things every now and then, and I have to go back through every single song and re-render it. And because of this mode, and with the right set of batch files, I can actually, and I have it set up in my show folder, I have a single command file, and if I double click on it, it will actually in batch go through all of my XML files, re-render them, and save the FSCQ files, and it will actually also do an FTP upload onto my Pi player. And so my whole show gets updated automatically when I make those sort of changes. Definitely a useful mode to use. Okay, arrow key to scroll a model list in layout. Right. So there's a couple of things that have changed here. So what this lets you do is you can click the arrow key like this and move a model around. You can also select multiple models. Let's get the right ones, using the control key, and you can move them together. I also fixed it so it's much easier to rubber band models, and then you can move all those models using the rubber band as well. So it just makes setting your layout up a little bit easier. It used to be that rubber banding, I think you had to hold the shift key down to do. But now, as long as you don't click on a model, you can rubber band at any time from anywhere. We're up to 50. That's 4 releases done. This one was huge. But anyway, we'll push on. Adding a tooltip. I'm sure when you all first started using xLights, does anyone know what the red means versus the not when it's not red? For me, that wasn't incredibly obvious. It would have been easier if these were broken when they weren't linked and linked when they were. And so now I at least give you a tooltip that tells you what's going to happen when you click on it. That unlinked it, that linked it, that unlinked it, that linked it. So minor little usability things. Start channel checks, we talked about that. FPP Connect, we're going to come back to FPP Connect because that's a much more involved topic, and it also includes the whole Falcon stuff. Multi-ArtNet universe adding. We showed ArtNet universe adding. You can add multiple universes at the same time, just like you can with E131, so I won't go back into that. I don't think that's significant enough. We talked about rubber band selection. The right-click menu on the controller list. So let me quickly go through that. I showed you a little while ago that I can shift, so I'm using the shift and the arrow key to select those, and I can go in and activate or deactivate controllers. I can also do things like bulk edit things. So I can bulk edit these things and change their IP address. I can change them away from multicast. Like so. So if you've suddenly had an IP address change, you can go and quickly edit them all without having to open up each one individually. I can also bulk edit these and say, actually, they should have been 512 channels. That's done. I can also go in and bulk edit the description as well. Another thing that I'm sure a lot of people didn't bother to do once the description field was added. But now you can bulk edit them as long as they're together. Actually, they don't even have to be together. You can also control and click discontinuously across the networks. The other thing that's been added is I can now actually click and drag these up and move them. And it will actually auto scroll as well if you've got a list that's longer than the screen. As you move to the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen, the list will auto scroll, which saves you having to click the arrow buttons hundreds of times, which used to happen. You'll also notice this is pretty snappy now. It used to be, particularly as you added the large number of universes here, this would really lag really badly every time you change things. It doesn't do that anywhere near as much anymore. The reason for that is I make you pay the penalty when you switch away from the screen. You're not going to notice with just these many universes, but if you're like me and you have well over 100 universes and you use extensively the universe start channel mapping, it's got to do a bunch of calculations to account for all the changes we just made to our setup. And that takes a bit of time. And so rather than having the lag here when you're trying to drag things around and fix it all up, you pay the penalty when you switch away from that particular screen. So yeah, we inserts. Okay, so when you do an ad, it adds it to the bottom, but now you can come up here and say, actually, no, I want to insert my controller here, and it will insert it into the part of the list where you did the right click, which means adding an extra universe in the middle here is not as hard as it used to be, where you had to add it to the bottom and then move it all the way back up again. Again, a painful process that we were trying to avoid. You can also do a delete here. You can select multiple and delete them as well. And then there's the upload to controller, and this is where you do all of that FPP and Falcon uploading. But like I said, we're not going to go there. We'll come back to that later. Bug. VU meter to use Papagayo layout 0. Okay, so what this was you're all familiar with timing tracks. The VU meter has a number of modes in it which let you where am I going to put it? Where's my matrix? There's my matrix. So there's a number of modes here where you can trigger off the timing mark. So timing event color. I choose the timing, which is new timing. And when I play that, using my shift, as it crosses each timing mark, it changes color. And that works fine off a timing track like this, but if this timing track was a Papagayo track, it just wouldn't work. Now what it will do is it will actually read the top layer of that Papagayo track. So that might be typically your phrases or would be the top layer. And so it will allow it to trigger off that. So you can do things like use it to automatically change color as you go from phrase to phrase in your song. That sort of thing. All right, I'm going to stop there. because we're about out of time again. And I guess we'll go to one more and maybe we'll get to Christmas. Oops, where do we go?